Hello, folks. Good to see you. Good to have you with us today. Thank you very much for joining our live stream today. So this is one of our community matters streams. And I'm just looking. We've already started with a technical blunder. We've got Emma Cuthbertson's name on here instead of mine. So let me get rid of that. Anyway, thank you very much for being with us. We're very pleased to have you here. We're going to be talking with a couple of people shortly who are going to tell you a bit more about our brand new project. So we last year started to look at some work around the elder community, and we were very keen that we made sure there was representations of LGBT elders or people that are 50 plus in the work that we do. So we came up with the idea of doing a bit of a podcast, and we know lots and lots of people have done new podcasts in the last few weeks and months, but this one's been in the works for quite some time now. But we finally got there, only just to be cut off by coronavirus. So we'll talk a bit more about some of the disruption in a second. But I'm very pleased to first of all introduce our guest, Dom Miller-Graham, who's been working with us from Our Story Scotland. So welcome, Dom.
Hello.
Yeah. Can you hear us, Dom?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Hear you grand.
Good. So listen, tell us a wee bit about this project that you've been involved in. So maybe start with a bit of your background for people that don't know your work with Our Story Scotland or haven't seen you around. What is it you do?
Well, I'll give you a bit about Our Story Scotland, so what I do makes more sense. Our Story Scotland's been about since 2001 in the diverse artist group at the Glasgow Gay and Lesbian Centre, what we would call the LGBT Centre now. Somebody asked the question, are we recording the lives of LGBTQI people in Scotland? And the answer was no. So within a year, Our Story Scotland came about, and they wanted to collect the lived experience of LGBT people in Scotland through written episodes and oral history interviews, and not just store them in an archive and hide them away, but then present them to the community through storytelling, through like countless exhibitions over the years. There was a Our Story Scotland Gaily in 2006, where lots of stories from all over Scotland were performed. There's recordings of that on YouTube. And God, where to start? I got involved 2 years ago. I volunteered to summarise oral history recordings, which was basically type up a smaller version of the recording for the National Library of Scotland. And from there, I've started telling stories at community events, spoke at conferences, worked with yourself on this project, lots and lots and lots. We do different projects based on what we hear from the community. So after Brexit and all the xenophobia that came about after that, we done the Coming In project, which was to celebrate how rich Scotland's LGBT community is. When we got the AAA+ rating for LGBT protections, etc. in Scotland, people flocked from all over the country here, and we needed to acknowledge that somebody like me, who can travel from one end of Scotland to the other to explore my identity, people do that from all over the world and come to Scotland, and we wanted to record that and celebrate just the freedom of movement and why that's important specifically to the LGBT community. Right now we're doing the Queer Distancing project, where again we want our community to tell us what it's like for queer people during the quarantine, because our stories are often neglected to the point of erased. So we need to not just collect them and store them so future generations can hear our stories, but present these stories so our current community can tap into its heritage and its history to feel empowered and have an extra scaffold to your identity, really.
I mean, we've with Our Story Scotland on a couple of different projects now, and I think what you guys have done to keep those records alive, keep those experiences alive, through your work has been tremendous over a number of years, actually. We're coming into this relatively late in terms of gathering experiences of people all over Scotland, all over the country. But the amount of work that's available through the National Library and a couple of other places that you were telling me about earlier on, maybe you can talk about how people can access your work as well.
Well, the oral history, Our Story collect information through written episodes and interviews. The written episodes are archived at the library, the Mitchell Library in Glasgow, and the oral history recordings are archived at the National Library Scotland. We've got Edwin Morgan, Sigrid Nielsen, Alan Smith, Kezia Dugdale, Richard Dyer, Derek Org, John Wilkes, yourself, Stuart. The list goes on and on and on. We've had a fantastic intern, Lindsay, recently, who has done a tremendous job of doing 20 summaries, so they can all go to the National Library now. And then it's up to the National Library themselves and their staff to get them available for researchers, for the public. We also have a couple of, like I said, video clips that are stored at the Kelvin Grove Moving Image Library. So all Our Story Scotland's archives are accessible from those institutions. And as well, there's a wealth of information on Our Story Scotland's website. Loads and loads about the exhibitions going way back to 2003, 2002, right up to the present day. Out of Bounds was an exhibition that was first put together in 2010, and that was recently exhibited in 2 places in Scotland for this year's History Month.
So tell us a wee bit more about this particular project then. That's what we're here to talk about. You've been all out and around the country before the days of lockdown, interviewing some, well, lots of, all of them were so interested, the stories that you've got back. You've had loads and loads of material to edit down into these 6 episodes. So tell us about your experiences out and about and speaking to the people that you have talked to.
I have to say thank you to everybody that's shared my email address, contact details, or gave relatives a nudge or friends a nudge to get in touch, because the amount of people that I was able to interview was nothing compared to the amount of people that got in touch from all over the world, all over Scotland as well. Like, there's a lovely couple up in Wick that I'm desperate to go meet. There's a couple in Butte that I just couldn't get to because of weather. Every time I was on the West Coast, there was a storm hitting, train cancellations, all the rest of it. But it's a privilege to be asked to go and meet these people and to have the opportunity to listen and ask questions and hear points of view. Some of them uncomfortable, some you don't want to hear, but valued and authentic and just so rich. And like, to begin with, we wanted to focus on like activism, but then how do you define activism? Some people over the age of 50, their whole life has been activism, from coming out at school, being open about their gender differences, being open about talking about feeling different from a young age and just not fitting in, and how there was no network then, there was no community to join, there was no support group. Often that you had to make your own, or you had to brave it as that activist because there was nobody else doing it. You had to be that person that you were looking for because there was no one else about. I'm trying to think what else to say. There's so much. The history that we've learned, and I think there was a tweet the other day that said that I do what I do. It was Dr. Amy Tooth Murphy said she does what she does because of Section 28. And there's a bit of that for me in regards to an older generation that I didn't really get. I got excluded from because of Section 28. So there's information about just basic rights, basic battles that were won that we don't have any idea about because we've had it erased from our education, or it's not mainstream enough to be celebrated because it's just Scotland, it just happened in Glasgow, it just happened in Aberdeen or whatever. And these stories shouldn't be neglected because our community is better than that. Also, what I did find shocking was the amount of not just individuals but organisations I got in touch with. Do you know anybody over 50 who would want to be involved in this project? And the response was, oh, why are you asking me? Why are you asking me? We're all in our 20s, as if knowing somebody over 50 was somehow strange and I should question that. And I found that really surprising from within our community, where we need to challenge that ageism. And it's not just people, not just LGBT youth or anything like that. It's even some of my interviewees discussed the older loner guys in clubs when they were younger, and now they find themselves the loner older guys in clubs now, and they never questioned that, they never broke that cycle, and I think it's time that we did.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's something that many of the participants in the project talk about, the importance of that kind of cross-generation or intergenerational discussion about lives and how different lives are in many ways from now to back even 20, 30 years ago. And some of the participants talk quite a lot about the differences in how they feel now compared to how they felt back in the day, whenever that was. Did you see any other themes that have come out of some of the discussions that you've held with all the participants?
That never-ending search for meaning, for some sort of root that we can ground ourselves with, and that, I think that's been the main impetus for people taking part, because they want to give others that heritage, that grounding that they didn't have, they didn't have access to. The fluidity of identity and like what it means to be a cis lesbian compared to what that meant 20 years ago. An exploration of words as well, like Emma, who's coming on later, discusses about how when she was younger, she knew she was different, and everybody else told her that she was different and that it was wrong, but she didn't have the words to discuss that. And how even now, if you're a 70-year-old gay man, you might find yourself changing your identity to be a 70-year-old genderqueer person who is pansexual, because these words weren't around in a day when people were coming to terms with their identity, and that exploration never ends. That doesn't stop.
So tell us a wee bit about the episodes coming up then. You've done a lot of amazing work on the first 4 episodes. That's 4 out of a series of 6. So there's two more still to come. Tell us about some of the participants and just what they, well, tease it up. What have they talked about? What would we find interesting out of the first episode on tonight, for example?
What have they not talked about as well? Our first 2, Charlie and Michael, a lovely couple. They invited me to their home and I interviewed them, and it was a good 3 hours I got of material just discussing their life, how they got to where they are today. Their full oral history interview. And it was so rich and it was so entertaining, and it was so, like, I have to explain and paint an image where these 2 men are on a corner sofa, feet on each other's laps, being lovely, me sitting on the floor, like huddled around their cool flame, just eating up all this information, all this fascinating, funny, complex, contradictory information. And that's something that I really need to kind of say, that when we talk about LGBT history or queer history or whatever, it's not one narrative, and we really need to celebrate that and get excited about that. Our community is made up of multiple identities, and not like 2 cis white gay men are the same. That's just homophobic. Do you know what I mean? And that's something that we can really explore with Charlie and Michael, because they revel in their difference, and it's exciting and it's empowering and it's good fun. Good fun. I'm trying to think of things that specifically that people will find interest in, and I just think they're both a hoot. I just think you'll enjoy it. I just hope you have as much fun as listening to it as I did when I got to meet them.
Well, they starred 2 episodes, don't they?
Yeah.
Because there was so much really interesting material from both Charlie and Michael that we've been able to split that over a couple of episodes. So there's more to come from Charlie and Michael. Talk us through some of the other guests.
Well, the first 4 episodes are themed on individuals, and it was just really to set the scene and give people a taste of what an oral history interview is about, and that it's not about me. It's nowhere near. It's nothing to do with me. It's about our LGBT elders, which is a contested label as well, and I think it's important to kind of show that there is a broad range of identities, even within the G or the L or the T, and that just to show that these individuals are different, but the themes and what we face as a community kind of overlaps, and as well the thread of left-wing minor strikes coming out of the 80s, that oppositional politics, and how that still informs people's politics today. That's still pertinent. Like, what has your identity got to do with your politics? Well, these people are going to tell you.
It definitely is still relevant, and lots of people are still living with, the trauma, the challenges that they faced back then, and still some of that still plays, a really deep part in some people's lives, and you hear more about that through the series as we go.
And sorry, that's important to say as well. Like, LGBTQI history is a place with like that needs content warnings and trigger warnings, because it's difficult. It is a hard place to revisit, but these people have been brave enough and authentic enough to share this information for a reason, and it's worth listening to. It's worth finding a safe space, being grounded, and taking some time out of your own life to listen to this.
It definitely is, and it might be a good segue into introducing our guest then. So, as Dom explained earlier on, we have the very wonderful Emma Cuthbertson, who is joining us now. So we'll do the Eurovision bit, Emma. This is Dunfermline calling. Emma, can you hear us? Come on in, Emma.
Hello, guys. Hello.
Hello, it's lovely to see you. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you, first of all, for taking part in this series of podcasts and sharing, some really intimate parts of your life story. Tell us briefly just why you wanted to take part.
I guess I've always been interested in getting stories out there, and I was aware. I think particularly for the over 50s, when we were kicking about before the internet even, so our stories aren't recorded in the same way as a lot of younger people's are, because they're all doing blogs and everything else now. But our stories just weren't there. So I think it's important to in that context, so that there is a record of what our lives were like going through that.
And we're going to bring Dom in. He's going to talk more about the interview with you and some of the experiences that you had. Tell us, though, before that, just, how was it to take part actually in a project like this? Was it difficult to go back over, some very personal and some traumatic experiences in your life? And, would you encourage people, if there are opportunities like this again, to go for it?
I would definitely encourage people to do it. I would say set aside at least half the day. I don't think I set enough time and ended up feeling rushed that day. But also be mindful, because I did come away with stuff that day after talking about what I talked about. I did come away feeling a bit shaken and have to do a bit of self-care after it. So I think it's important for people to keep that in mind. It's definitely an important thing to do, but look after yourself after it.
And it's something that we're all very conscious of at Our Story Scotland. Like, people can get upset during interviews, and that's relevant and it's authentic. And like you said, you had to rush away at the end, but taking half an hour to sit down and have a cup of tea and talk about it, and even with that, you were, like, when I first got in touch with you, you were very, very concerned about, like, oh, who is this person? What does he want from me? What's going on here? And I do hope that you did come away from the experience feeling that that vulnerability was respected and treated with, like, the honour and the privilege that it should be treated with.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd never met you before that day, you know, but I now count you as a friend, so I think that says it all.
Brilliant. Love it. Love it. Same, exactly. And I think that that is part of telling your story, is that intimacy bonds us together, that, and the overlaps in our stories give us that community bond, give us that real strength. And we spoke about that, and you speak about that in a fantastic way, about just because you're a member of a community doesn't mean you know everybody's experiences of that community. You can't make assumptions. You have to take time and ask those questions and listen to that explanation. And I think that you definitely gave a brilliant explanation.
I think it was obviously something that's kind of struck me over the years, because everybody's like, this LGBT plus community, and I'm going, but everybody's an individual within that community, and how am I possibly going to know what it's like for a cis gay guy, or for a cis lesbian woman, or for a I don't know those experiences, so the only way I'm going to find out is by asking questions and say, hey, you know, tell me a bit about your life. So, you know, it'd be good for me to watch the stories from other parts of the community, and, you know, and see where they link up and see where the commonalities are.
So now that you've heard your episode and Emma's episode 3 and the first 4 that are available, are you happy with the results? Are you happy of what you're being able to share? And what do you think members of the community can take from your interview, Emma?
I was happy with. I was a little bit shocked, as I said to you, the other morning when I played it back, and I was like, "Oh, did I actually say some of that stuff?" But I was happy with what was there. As always, you could kind of come away and think, "Well, I wish I'd said this, or I wish I'd said that." I guess it feels a bit different, maybe for many trans people. I know there's a lot of focus on Section 28. And like I said, I lived through that, but for me, I was still in that place where I was just kind of identified as different and had no real language to say who I was. So I think the things that felt more relevant for me as a trans person, and when I was first coming out, was when the original Gender Recognition Act was coming out. And then obviously that was like 6 years before we even had the Equality Act. And I think it's important for people to remember, you know, there was some of us did live through a time where we had nowhere near the legal protections that we have at the moment. And I think it's really crucial for younger members of the community to understand that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's not so long ago. So long ago at all. Do you think, is there anything else that the community, do you think, needs to hear or needs to have more focus from like the over 50s community?
I think, like I said, on the whole LGBT plus spectrum, I do feel like there needs to be more work around building bridges within the community. You know, like how do we take our message across, you know, to cis heteronormative society if we don't have a concrete message ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I think an important piece of work is within our own community first, as well as taking that out further for other people to understand it. because sometimes it still feels like, not in a big way, but it still feels like there's some misunderstandings within our own community, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. On you go.
So to create a more powerful voice, it comes across better if the whole LGBT community is together, trying to say the same thing. Do you know what I mean?
And I think that there's a lot of the interviewees, I'm trying to, off the top of my head, all of the individuals that I spoke to were very much coming from a place of celebrating difference. It doesn't need to be LGBT as you understand it. It can be somebody else's LGBT as they understand it. But there's that commonality that we really need to stand behind each other and support that.
I think one of the biggest things for me, and I was only thinking about this the other night, it was actually coming out as trans gave me a whole spectrum of awareness of difference and intersectionality. You know, it made me much better on race. It made me much better on ableism. You know, it covered the whole spectrum because I could see how I was being treated. So right away it tapped me into, hold on a minute, this isn't right. That other people are being treated this way because of their race, or other people are being treated this way because they've got a disability, you know, and so on and so on. So I think I think it's focusing on all the current themes between minority groups and saying, right, we should all be supporting each other. And
you've paraphrased another interviewee that you've never met, Jenny, in episode 2, says that grown up working class lesbian in Dundee around the miners' strikes and Thatcher, it gave her a critical awareness of not being normal. So if you're a striking miner, or you're a feminist, or you're a refugee, you're spoken about in the same way, because you're all seen as different, you're all seen as not the norm. And like you said, we need to kind of push that out to like wider cis-normative society. I totally agree with you.
Aye, exactly. I think we all need to identify that we're being seen as not the norm and push back against what is the norm.
And it's
celebrate people for their differences.
Yeah, and celebrate how our identities inform that knowledge, inform that point of view.
Aye, I mean, I think a lot that's where a project like this comes in, you know, when you're going around talking specifically to people that are classed as elders within the community. And I still struggle a bit. I remember the first time somebody said that to me, "Oh, you're an elder," and I was like, "Oh, what does that mean?"
One of my friends asked me, in some situations, do you feel like an LGBT elder? And I do in some, like talking to 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds, absolutely. But elder, I still have, what do you think about the word elder and having somebody else tag you with that name, Emil? How do you feel about that?
I guess the first time it happened, it kind of took me aback a little bit. But then I thought, well, that's actually quite sweet. You know, there's a whole lot of worse things I've been called. You know, so referring to me as an elder, it was a kind of like, you're in this place where we respect you, you know, because we know you've came through this stuff. So it was in a kind of a sense of younger people were looking at me for advice and support. So in that way, it felt like a good thing to be called an elder. But I guess it's the whole thing about, I don't think any of us like to feel like we're getting old.
No, that's it. But again, it's a difference that we're going to have to celebrate as well. And that's another bond and another theme across all our identities. We all get old. We're all going to have to challenge that. And it's something as well that was quite brave of some interviewees to discuss, was how their own judgments about age, and when they see and what they picture as an elderly couple together or the same gender walking down the street, they don't think, oh, maybe they're a couple. They just think, oh, they're old. And that's so judgmental.
Yeah, old people don't have intimate relationships.
Emma, I wanted to ask whether you feel that there's an expectation on you as an elder or just an older LGBT person to support LGBT young people, to go out there and be an activist, given that you've lived through much worse times than many young people today will live through, hopefully. So do you feel a bit of pressure on having to be an activist when you're a bit later on in life?
Oh, Jesus, aye. This one's came up for me a lot. I think, being involved in political parties and stuff like that. And I've had today a lot of trying to find the balance between, yes, I feel like, I'm quite a confident and assertive person, so I'm good at what I do, but I also need to stop myself from taking on too much, because I feel that pressure, like, well, I need to do this because I'm the one that needs to pick up the younger people and the trans kids and stuff that are getting abused. Who's going to stand up for them if it's no me? And so it does feel like a pressure, but it needs a careful balancing act to keep looking after yourself at the same time.
And that's something that both Charlie and Michael explore, is the impact of being front and centre and activism, and how that can impact your relationships. And sometimes you have to throw in the towel and let somebody else take over, because it's tough going. It can be really, really tough going.
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting point in the first episode. I think that comes up tonight, Dom, doesn't it? In episode 1, where Charlie and Michael both talk about actually an expectation when they were younger to do something about the inequality that they had faced, but they also talk about the kind of draining effect that has on personal relationships, on work, on other relationships outside of the LGBT scene as well, as you face people with their own insecurities or beliefs. Do you think that there's likely to be those same types of experiences in the next 50 years? What will an older LGBT people, an older gay man or trans person who is maybe 18 or 20 today, what will their experiences be like over the next 50 years, do you think? A lot better, worse, or about the same as yours, Emma?
That sounds like a really scary question right now, given all the stuff that's going on around trans people at the moment. I mean, obviously, ideally, I'd like to say their experience will be a lot easier than ours. But I think the period we're in at the moment kind of makes us all aware that this is the concrete, and if we just get the wrong government or whatever in, it can disappear as quickly as we got it.
And that's discussed as well. Charlie and Michael discuss how that's not just in Scotland, that's like talking about Poland, talking about all over the world. We have a community that's international, and we really need to think about where it's still criminalised. Some of our identities are still face death penalties, and we need to bolster that solidarity with those communities as well, so we can appreciate what we have here and the lives that we can live because of the protections that most of us do take for granted, because that's the point. We should be able to take them for granted, but like Emma said, we can't be complacent, because it just takes a change in government and it's over, it's finished.
I really think that part of the new LGBT inclusive education in Scotland should absolutely embrace the experiences of older people. We should understand the history of, yes, the wider worldwide LGBT movement and how we got to where we are now, but also the local stories of how those issues affected local people in our communities and in our cities and towns. Here in Scotland, I think you cannot base our queer history just on things that have happened outside of the UK or only in London or Edinburgh or Glasgow. There's thousands and thousands of more LGBT people that live up and down the country in rural or suburban areas, and their experiences, like mine, where that's the whole reason that we set up Pink Saltire, are very different to city life. And there's a lack of anonymity for a start, and some people really want to cherish that. And the cities, bigger urban populations allow you to be a bit more anonymous about what you're up to, or who you're going out with, who you're meeting up with, what groups you're going to. That maybe local life still to this day doesn't offer that same anonymity. You get the villages that everybody knows everybody and what's going on. So if you're an incomer or you've got something different about you, you're often immediately seen by everybody else. Some people embrace that, and others definitely want to shy away from it.
I think though that everybody knows the big, the migration of LGBT people. We go elsewhere to explore who we are, but there is also the theme of people coming back from where they came from, or where they felt they had to leave, where they were not safe to stay. And now that they are empowered, they've had a community that's gave them the words to explore who they are, they're now returning to the villages and the rural areas that they once felt excluded from, and they're not using a little rusty silver spoon to try and carve out a space for themselves. They've got big shovels, that because they're empowered, they've done this, they've built communities, they've been part of networks in these cities, come back to rural areas like yourself, Stuart, like Fife, and then start these organisations to strengthen these bonds that do exist. They are there, but they're not getting noticed. They don't get the attention that the metropolis has. They just don't, and it is a shame, but times are changing because of the internet, because of projects like this, because we are thinking more of the wee primary school in a village and the care home in a village, and getting in there and thinking who's really looking after our community who might be there, because they are there, they're just not visible, they're just not counted.
Well, Emma, on behalf of Pink Saltire and Dom and everybody at Our Story Scotland, I just wanted to express our thanks, first of all, for coming on today and giving us some of your lockdown time, but also just for sharing your really detailed and deeply personal story with the rest of the world, because lots of people are going to hear this. Thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thanks, Stuart. Thanks, Dom. Nice
Thank you, Emma. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. See you later. Bye. Thank you. So, Dom, we're going to have a chat just about where people can watch the podcast then. So tonight we're going to be launching the podcast online at 6 p.m. There'll be a link on our website, and there'll be a short article written about the story with a couple of quotes from you and I, and then the link to play episode 1. What can people expect?
Oh, I should have prepared this more, because there's so much you could say. Wow. Well, I hope that people are entertained, because I could have gave you a very detailed documentary-like format, and I didn't want that. I wanted you to get to know people and get to know why events mattered so much, why things had to change through getting to know people. Because, well, I can give you a dry, dusty list of legislation and why it changed and all the rest of it, but it's the passion and the relationships, the love, the loss, the celebrations, all that goes into the blood, sweat and tears. It's all that goes into it. And as well, like when you ask somebody, are you an activist? Like I said, they often say no. Do you have a story? No, I don't have a story. I've got no story. So tell me a little bit about where you grew up. And 3-4 hours later, they might take air and ask you if you've got another question, because we've been told that our point of view isn't significant. So when you show LGBT people that your point of view is so significant, they just give what they've got to offer. And Charlie and Michael certainly did that.
And let's talk briefly about some of the individuals that we weren't able to get to, because so many people volunteered to take part. You were already working through a schedule of interviews that took hours and hours and hours, some of them to actually complete. And then along came coronavirus and everybody was locked down. So that was really frustrating for me as the project sponsor, but for you, I know you had so many people lined up to go out and see, and the door was slammed shut on that. How did that go?
Well, I had in total over 30 interviewees lined up, and I think I managed to just get 22 before lockdown hit. The LGBTQI Social and Dance Club at the National Theatre Scotland, I'd missed them. I was hoping to get Sue John and who's the other member of staff? Kilpatrick at the Women's Library in Glasgow. Who else was I going to get? There was the guys from Switchboard as well. I had them lined up. Kelvin Grove, Moving Image Library, have always supported Our Story Scotland, and they gratefully gave me free access to their rooms to conduct interviews. Brilliant rooms for acoustics and stuff. But I had to cancel because we were in lockdown. Diane Barry and her partner Kate Charlesworth, I was hoping to get them. I was just organising an interview with them when lockdown came into place. Oh, who else? Lots and lots of people. And again, like I said, there was people all over Scotland. I was hoping to get up to Inverness. 2 storms hit on the weekends that I planned to go up. And again, I think that will be a big regret, and that will be the next thing. Get up to Inverness, get up to Wick, get over to Butte, get these stories from the women's switchboard line. The 2 men up in Wick have got some excellent stories that they've shared some with me via email. The list can go on and on and on. There's so many people.
And tell us, you're a fan of a selfie, as anyone who will follow you on Twitter will know, and his Twitter handle is there, by the way. But let's have a look. You have actually got some here of some of the selfies with people involved in the event. So talk us through from left to right. Who do we have here? Who did you meet up with?
I'm terrible with names, and this is like the worst quiz for me. Stephen Thompson at the end. It's not diverse artist. Glasgow, yeah, lovely. He gave an excellent interview. Such a name dropper though. Wow, such a name dropper. I loved it. Now runs Outspoken Artist down in Paisley. Talked about Glasgow and about working at the Citizens Theatre. We had from who was the names that he mentioned? David Tennant. All the names from the Citizens Theatre, I'm sure that everybody's familiar with. And it was lovely because the treasurer for Our Story Scotland, Donald, he gave us a lovely interview, and he spoke about some of the queer theatre that was put on at the Citizens, and how it was so lucky to have such cultural events like Glasgow on his doorstep to take advantage of. In the middle, there's Jan. Jan was lovely. Jan could adopt me, and that would be lovely. Just be my gran for a wee while. Jan works for, is it Clackmannanshire Council? It's one of the councils. Gave a brilliant interview about being in the traffic police, some of the challenges that she faced. Kinda pre-all protections, pre-all every law that you can think of. Jan had none of those protections when she was just trying to get by, trying to pay her bills, trying to have a family, trying to just survive like the rest of us. And it was a real fight at times for her. But she never feels sorry for herself. Not at all. Not at all. Puts us to shame. I'm trying to remember the lovely man's name. Is it Ian McMillan? It's definitely McMillan. Again, he was who spoke about seeing older men in clubs when he was younger and never ever questioning that. And now he finds himself that older man. And like, we have to break that cycle of just being so ageist, because we're better than that, aren't we? I thought we were. And it's like what Emma said, it's one of those things that we need to work on within our community. I don't mean to be preachy, but we need to work on that. We need to start embracing our older generation and not shirking away and being ageist.
Absolutely. And hopefully this podcast series does a little bit of that legwork. So it helps share the experiences that many of the LGBT people who are and a slightly older generation have experienced that hopefully young people today won't experience. But it's important that we understand where we come from, and the experiences that our LGBT community have faced, and the challenges that mostly have been overcome over many years, down to the work and the activism of these people that you've talked to.
But then they also talk about where they're going. And have you ever seen a pride flag in a care home? Have you ever thought of that, or looked at the diversity and equalities policy of a care home? And that's someplace that we might all end up one day. And I don't want to, the way statistics show, I don't want to be expected to go back in the closet just because I'm old. And I know Denise, who's watching, when I asked her in her interview, what is your worry? What do you think about being forced to go back in the closet if you had to go into a care home or supported accommodation? And she says, just kill me. She was later in life coming into her identity, and so just kill me. That's enough. No, just don't do that to me. And I think that's so strong, so strong in sentiment, and we really need to listen to that. And other members of the community who have had friends who have went into care homes who have been very unhappy, felt very uncomfortable visiting, and we need to do that work. We need to start thinking about that now, because that community exists and we're letting them down.
And they're very much not separate, are they? They are 100%, and they should be 100% part of the wider LGBT movement. And I think lots of their specific needs have been overlooked for a number of years. Certainly their stories haven't been shared too often. I know the people at LGBT Health and Wellbeing and LGBT Age have done some marvellous work. They've got a couple of videos on their website, actually. But, you know, it's so important just to capture these stories. It just shows the diverse range of experiences that people have had all over Scotland, not just city life and rural places and small towns and villages as well. So thank you for everything that you've done to go and capture as much as you possibly can. Sorry we gave you such a hard task in terms of the editing floor. So you've had to cut so much out just to get it down to these podcasts. Well, listen, thank you very much, Dom. Thanks for joining us today, talking about this amazing project and the podcasts that we've been able to produce. A final thanks again to everybody who took part in interviews. We have lots more to come. You'll hear more about these podcasts every week, every Monday. They'll be taking part. They'll be released on the web. We hope also to be able to get them onto your intelligent devices, so you'll be able to download through iTunes. You'll be able to listen through Spotify. And we're looking at trying to get it onto Alexa, if you have Alexa devices in your home as well. So we'll get there, but for tonight, you'll be able to listen from 6 o'clock on the Pink Saltire website and our social media streams. We can't wait for you to hear everything that's been done and hear all of Dom's work in putting it all together as well. So last words from you, Dom?
Oh, enjoy it. Just enjoy it. Don't think about the work that I've done. Just enjoy the stories and the experiences, and just lap it up. Just bathe in it. Love it.
Absolutely. Good words to end on there. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thanks for all your comments as well. It's been lovely to hear from all of our supporters and followers. Please do tune back in at 6 o'clock tonight, where you'll be able to get full length and listen to our first podcast. Thanks, everybody. Take care, and thanks for watching.
Thanks. Bye.